our common agenda. As mentioned in my letters dated 23rd December 2021, 13th January, 14th February and 18th February 2022, this thematic consultation is held pursuant to Resolution 76/6 and is the third in a series of 5 thematic consultations. The theme of the third thematic consultation is Frameworks for a Peaceful World, Promoting Peace, International Law, and Digital Cooperation. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. Under Secretary General Volker Turk, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, thank you for joining today's third thematic consultation on our common agenda under the theme of a frameworks for a peaceful world promoting peace, international law, and digital cooperation. The third thematic consultation focuses on the OCA's provisions regarding the maintenance of peace and conflict prevention, compliance with international law, and respecting human rights, and the promotion of digital cooperation. The comprehensive agenda of our discussion underscores the increasing complexity of today's global peace and security architecture. The major issues we confront: geopolitical conflict, terrorism, the proliferation of nuclear and other weapons, and cyber threats, among them, are increasingly interlinked. And the difficulty of resolving them has only been amplified by COVID-19 pandemic. This is a critical time, and we at the United Nations are called upon to meet the challenge. Now more than ever, we must commit to the spirit of our charter and cooperate to maintain peace. We must continue to provide the necessary support for peacekeeping operations as one of the UN's most effective tools to maintain peace and resolve conflict. We must invest in peace building and ensure adequate, predictable, and sustainable financing for it, acknowledging its invaluable role in helping countries maintain peace through strengthened institutions and governance. We must support preventive diplomacy and enhance bilateral, multilateral, and regional mediation capacities. And throughout such efforts, we must also increase the participation of women, acknowledging their equal stake in the peace-making process. We must implement holistic strategies to combat terrorism and violent extremism, including by involving youth and addressing terrorist propaganda and recruitment through the internet. We must reverse the proliferation of both conventional and nuclear weapons, and we must preserve outer space as an area for peaceful cooperation, exploration, and discovery. Excellencies, our efforts to protect and promote peace must always be guided by international law, the core principles of which are outlined in the United Nations Charter. This includes the sovereign equality of states and the prohibition of the use of force in international relations. And to ensure that the United Nations can fulfill its key responsibilities to preserve global peace and stability, nations must always abide by international humanitarian law. By promoting rule of law and preserving peace, we will be better positioned to meet the sustainable development goals and uphold our fundamental rights and freedoms. Excellencies, a just peace is not only the absence of armed conflict, but also the presence of human rights and dignity. To that end, we must recognize the certainty of human rights in the United Nations agenda and work. I chose respecting the rights of all as one of my key priorities of my presidency of hope, out of my conviction that continued discrimination against marginalized communities and continued violations of their human rights will fuel resentment and escalate tensions. We must redouble our commitment to uphold the human worth and dignity of all communities. Excellencies, To effectively maintain peace, we must also keep pace with the realities of our century. Digital technologies have transformed our societies, bringing with them unprecedented opportunities and challenges. They can be used to uplift the human condition, accelerate our progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, and usher in a new era of scientific achievement and economic prosperity. But they can also be used to fuel divisions, undermine our privacy and security, and diminish our capacity to discern truth from fiction. As we strive to address the digital divide and ensure safe and affordable digital access for everyone, let us also prioritize the principles that will allow us to harness the benefits of these technologies in a positive manner. Principles such as accountability, transparency, and factual accuracy. Excellencies, the wide-ranging issues outlined in our common agenda that we will discuss today illustrates the complexity and scale of today's security architecture. They underscore the level of cooperation and goodwill needed to secure a peaceful future for our constituents who expect us to rise to the occasion and deliver. By exchanging views, by working together, and by building on our partnerships, let us prove that we are equal to the task. In that spirit, I wish you all a very productive session. I thank you. I now invite Mr. Volker Turk, Under-Secretary General for Policy, to make a statement.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Every morning, thousands of our colleagues get up all around the world, often in remote corners of our planet, and work tirelessly for peace, provide humanitarian relief, support development efforts, and promote human rights. Many a time, they risk their lives, they endure hardship, often away from their families and loved ones, and yet they continue. They do this work in response to mandates entrusted to them by member states. They believe in the principles and purposes of the United Nations, its fundamental values, and the aspirations of the UN Charter. They witness firsthand what a difference we, the United Nations, can make in the lives of real people out there. Ultimately, this is about the search for a better world, for peace, and the betterment of lives everywhere. When we discuss the issues today and tomorrow in the solemn hall of the General Assembly, let us not forget what this organization has been able to do on the ground, day in, day out, often invisible and away from the limelight, not least because of what you and people all around the world expect from us. Let us not forget what tools we have at our disposal and how we can strive to improve and innovate them. And allow me a personal remark. In my own UN work over the years, I've been able to spend quite a bit of time listening to and learning from people who have been affected by conflict and violence. Their stories remind us of the volatility of life, how from one day to the next, violence and conflict can massively disrupt an existence. Each of the stories confronts us with the stark realities and unimaginable choices that so many people face in zones of conflict or instability around the world, and they make us feel in our bones the profound importance of the ability to live in peace. And peace, as you know, is the central promise of the Charter, and one of the principal global public goods the United Nations was established to deliver. Mr. President, as the Secretary General has said, the Charter of the United Nations is an exceptional achievement in the annals of history. Its purposes, its principles, its provisions epitomize all that we stand for and guide all that we do. The United Nations was founded to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, and the Charter entrusted the Security Council with primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. No doubt, today's world is infinitely more complex and interconnected than 76 years ago. The Secretary General described many of these complexities in his remarks at the Munich Security Conference last Friday, as well as in his January speech about the priorities in this assembly. Apart from interstate conflict, we have been confronted with a myriad of internal conflicts, internecine strife, the threat of terrorist groups and organized crime, the negative side of a digital world gone awry, challenges around disarmament, inequalities and socio-economic vulnerabilities, the threats from biorisks, disinformation, hate speech, cyber attacks, and often a combination of all of them. Geostrategic divides and dysfunctional power relations are a complicating factor, as are evolving threats from climate change, environmental degradation, and competition over critical resources, including water, arable land, or precious material. And let us not forget the systematic violence against women and girls that we witness in zones of conflict every day. We all have a stake in finding solutions. What may be local today could very well become a regional or global issue tomorrow. It is against this backdrop that we need to keep asking ourselves, how can we learn from history and galvanize the action necessary to anticipate problems, to prevent crises, to build peace and reshape our responses? The proposals for consideration before you include a new agenda for peace, a dialogue on peaceful use of outer space, a global digital compact for an open, free, and secure digital future, a roadmap for international law, and a global code of conduct to promote integrity in public information. What these proposals have in common is a desire to build on the instruments that we have so that they are adapted to current and future challenges, while also, of course, discussing the gaps that have emerged. Mr. President, let me briefly elaborate on some of these proposals. First, in 1992, at a critical inflection point in world history, the Secretary General of the time put forward an agenda for peace that would shape peace and security work for decades to come. As this Secretary General has said in his Common Agenda report, we are at a similar inflection point. The monumental nature of the challenges today requires us to be even more ambitious. What could a new agenda for peace look like today? Would it be a catalyst to respond to existing and future challenges? Would it be an inspiration to tackle the governance of frontier issues, such as digital technologies in modern warfare? The Common Agenda report makes a number of suggestions. They include addressing strategic risks, foresight, efforts to reduce all forms of violence, in particular from a gender perspective, and overhaul of prevention and peace building. We know how critically important it is that women and girls are at the center of our peace and security agenda. Other elements in the report regarding trust, the social contract, sustainable development, and misinformation that we discussed in the first two rounds of consultations are equally relevant. The report also includes proposals to strengthen the Peacebuilding Commission and the Peacebuilding Fund. We have heard from many of you that the problem of terrorism warrants more in-depth consideration. A new agenda for peace would also build on the wide-ranging internal reforms to the peace and security pillar that this Secretary General has instituted in his first term including when it comes to the action for peacekeeping, a new office for counterterrorism, the hate speech strategy, and the focus on prevention. And it is crucial, in particular, that factors that fuel conflict and violence are addressed as a priority. The focus on prevention also highlights the need for an integrated approach within the United Nations system, as well as closer cooperation with national, regional, and international stakeholders. Mr. President, second, our discussion today is also linked to a strong rule of law orientation. We know that international law is the backbone of an interdependent world, and indeed the Charter envisages the progressive development of international law and its codification. In line with the Commitment 4 of the UN 75 Leaders Declaration, the Common Agenda report proposes a global roadmap for the development and effective implementation of international law. It also suggests regular dialogues on legal matters of global concern, building very much on the work of the Sixth Committee. A number of recommendations also relate to making fuller use of human rights mechanisms, recognizing the strong appreciation of member states for the Universal Periodic Review. In this connection, let me also refer to the Secretary General's call to action for human rights, which has identified, as you know, 7 areas for action with attention to the full breadth of rights, economic, social, cultural, civil, and political, emphasizing their universality and indivisibility. Third, nowhere has the need for international standard setting become so apparent as in relation to the technology revolution, in particular the digital world, cyberspace, artificial intelligence, and other frontier issues. And we have seen how non-state actors have emerged as very powerful entities in this regard. It is in these areas where the gap between extreme risk and opportunity widens in the absence of norms and standards. These areas could find reflection, as we suggest, in the new Agenda for Peace, in the Global Digital Compact, in the Outer Space Dialogue. Our common agenda also suggests to update and clarify the application of human rights frameworks to address these issues and to prevent harms. At the same time, and that's very much at the practical level, there is an urgent need to bridge the huge gap in the digital world so that everyone can benefit from the immense opportunities that this world offers. This requires accelerated action to connect by 2030 the remaining 3.8 billion people who are currently offline. Fourth, we have unfortunately seen how disinformation and other harmful practices have been used to serve personal and commercial agendas with an incredibly polarizing impact on societies. And as mentioned earlier, the proposal here is to advance a global code of conduct to promote integrity in public information. Mr. President, in short, many of the proposals before you have the potential to be brought together as tracks for the proposed Summit of the Future in 2023. We very much look forward to hearing your views and reactions to this cluster of ideas. My colleagues in the UN system will be listening carefully to all of you, and we will be able to share some initial thinking tomorrow during the panel discussion and obviously in the weeks and months to come. Let me conclude by stressing how deeply we appreciate these consultations. We have embarked on an important collective learning and, dare I say, organic growth process, really uniting behind a search for what the United Nations, in all its facets, needs to deliver on in the 21st century so that we can proudly claim good ancestorship. Thank you.
I thank the Under-Secretary General for Policy for his statement. I now invite His Excellency Philippe Kridelka, Permanent Representative of Belgium and Vice President of the General Assembly, to preside over the remainder of the thematic consultation. Excellences.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I will now give the floor to the representatives of member states and observer states to the General Assembly who wish to make statements. Given the time constraints, they are asked to give their statements from their seats. And as announced in the UN Journal, the time limit is 3 minutes for delegates speaking on behalf of countries, 5 minutes for those delivering a statement on behalf of a group, and 3 minutes for those in their national capacity. So please bear with us. Please maintain discipline. We have about 80 speakers today, and if we wish to have everyone take the floor, I think it's in the interest of everyone that we abide by this time limit. That is 3 minutes on behalf of your country and 5 on behalf of a group of countries. Longer statements and position statements obviously can be sent in to e-statements. If delegations inscribed on the list are unable to deliver their statements before the end of today's proceedings, they can send them in to e-statements by tomorrow, the 22nd of February. And the text of statements submitted by speakers inscribed on the list that have not been delivered will be posted on e-statements in the Journal of the United Nations. And I would really like to thank you all for your cooperation. Due to time constraints, the list of speakers for the plenary segment is closed at this stage. I would now like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan, who will be speaking on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. You have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to deliver the statement on behalf of the Group of 77 in China. At the outset, I would like to reiterate my gratitude to the President of the General Assembly for convening these consultations, and to the Secretary General and his team for his commitment to continuously engage with the states on various proposals and concepts in the report. We have listened very carefully to the statement made by Under-Secretary General Mr. Volker Turk this morning. As done during previous consultations, I will summarize the written inputs that have already been shared with the President of the Assembly. Mr. Vice President, the group believes that the misuse of information and communications technologies to spread disinformation and hate speech, particularly online platforms, is a cause for serious concern. This could be used to mislead and to spread racism, xenophobia, negative stereotyping, stigmatization, and most dangerously, breach of individuals' right to privacy. In this regard, the group emphasizes the need to counter disinformation in a manner that complies with states' obligations under international human rights law. The group welcomes the efforts of the Secretary General to promote international cooperation in countering disinformation and takes note of the proposed Global Code of Conduct that promotes integrity in public information. However, further clarity is required regarding the formulation of this Code of Conduct and social media regulations. The Group of 77 in China believes that racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance are a repudiation of humanity and regards that millions continue to be victims of the same. In this regard, we call for the full and effective implementation of the Durban Declaration and Programme of Action. The group also acknowledges and profoundly regrets the suffering inflicted on millions of men, women, and children as a result of slavery, the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, apartheid, genocide, and past tragedies, and calls upon those that have not yet expressed remorse or presented apologies to find some way to contribute to the restoration of the dignity of victims. The group welcomes the establishment of the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent as an advisory body and requests the Secretary-General and the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights to strengthen the substantive support to the forum for fulfilling its mandate. The group also believes that the establishment of an international independent expert mechanism may promote a transformative change for racial justice and equality in the context of law enforcement globally. The group notes with concern that persons belonging to racial and ethnic minorities and other groups, including Asians and people of Asian descent, especially women and girls, have been victims of racist violence, threats of violence, discrimination, and stigmatization as a result of the pandemic. The group stresses the urgent need to prevent, monitor, and address the disproportionate effects of the pandemic on older persons. In this context, we reaffirm the political declaration and the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging 2002 and support global efforts towards an age-inclusive implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The group supports the Universal Periodic Review Mechanism, which is an impartial, objective, non-political, and non-selective mechanism to review human rights of all countries without any distinction or discrimination. We seek further information regarding the proposal to review the modalities of the UPR mechanism as part of the new guidelines. Mr. Vice President, the group takes note with appreciation of the recommendations of the Secretary-General to improve digital cooperation. The group also emphasizes the importance of ensuring synergies and avoiding duplication across various entities working on digital cooperation. For the group, the important issues pertaining to digital cooperation remain inclusive digital economy, access to digital networks and connectivity, technology transfer, investment in digital infrastructure, data protection, artificial intelligence, avoiding internet fragmentation, countering the proliferation of disinformation and misinformation, and outlining shared principles for a digital future for all to achieve the 2030 Agenda. It is important to avoid unnecessary politicization of technical issues to foster an open, fair, inclusive, and non-discriminatory environment for the development of digital technologies in developing countries. Mr. Vice President, the Group of 77 in China supports the role of the UN in promoting and protecting human rights. However, further information is required on the proposed new UN system-wide agenda for protection of human rights. The group reiterates that the Fifth Committee of the General Assembly is the sole main committee of the organization entrusted with responsibilities for administrative, financial, and budgetary matters. In this regard, any budgetary, financial, and administrative matters, including those related to the establishment of a peacekeeping operation or a special political mission, should be discussed solely in the framework of the Fifth Committee in conformity with the Charter. Mr. Vice President, allow me at this time to, in my national capacity, to add a summary of Pakistan's comments on this cluster. Mr. Vice President, the new Agenda for Peace addresses a number of relevant existing and emerging challenges. Yet the report's diagnosis of and prescriptions for the current international threats to peace and security are, in our view, incomplete. The principal threats to international peace and security, as so visible today, are caused by interstate disputes. We should continue to rely on the universal and consistent application of the principles of the UN Charter, non-use of force, respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, non-interference in their internal affairs, self-determination of peoples, to preserve and build international peace and security, and provide equal security to all states. The expansion and proliferation of military alliances to promote or preserve military dominance is not the route to global or regional peace and security. In our view, the Secretary General can do much more to promote international peace, especially by utilizing fully his authority under Article 99 of the Charter. Mr. President, the 6 core areas identified for the new agenda for peace are neither core nor comprehensive. To respond to the current international threats, the UN must focus on upholding respect for the Charter, including the obligation to carry out the decisions under Article 25 of the Security Council, to promote the peaceful and just resolution of disputes, and to address the root causes of conflicts, including the use of force, foreign intervention, occupation, xenophobia, Islamophobia, and hate speech, as well as poverty, inequality, and exploitation. Mr. Vice President, the full body of Pakistan's comments on this cluster will be circulated in this assembly. I thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan and the G77 and China group for this statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Morocco on behalf of the Arab group. You have the floor, sir. Mr. President of the General Assembly, it is my great honor to speak on behalf of the Arab group. We commend the ongoing interest of the Secretary General to international peace and security through the new agenda for peace, proposed to bolster efforts to ensure global security and risk management. The Arab group reiterates its position regarding the Palestinian question and the central role of it. We reiterate our support for the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, pursuant to references for peace, including the General Assembly resolutions, the Arab Peace Initiative, and also the right of the Palestinian people for self-determination to bring an end to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory and Arab territory. We also support the independence of its state in the June 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. We reiterate the importance of the Palestinian question being a priority in the UN. As regards the bases for this new agenda for peace, we would stress the importance of multilateralism efforts while respecting state sovereignty. Secondly, the Arab group insists on the need for the peaceful settlement of conflicts through preventive diplomacy, arbitration, and good offices. Thirdly, we would stress our deep belief that lasting peace is necessary. We need to tackle the root causes, therefore, of conflict, and measures need to be taken to tackle violence, in particular, violence against women and children. International peace and security is faced with political violence. There's a need, fourthly, to invest in efforts to prevent conflict and to build peace. There's a need to strengthen the role of the Secretary General here, in this context, there's a need to explore various options in the area of early warning and in the area of peace building. Resources need to be bolstered for peace building and the Peace Building Fund. Fifth, we would focus on collective efforts in tackling terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. Sixthly, the Arab group would reiterate the importance of strengthening human rights at all levels, at local, regional, and international levels. Addressing human rights at the international level must be done within the special UN bodies dedicated to them. And the new agenda for peace should focus on matters pertaining to women and gender equality. Seventhly, we welcome the Secretary General's initiative to give new impetus to our vision in the area of disarmament. The Arab group commends the fact that interest has been paid in the report to the peaceful uses of outer space. This is a good thing. And also, priority has been given to strengthening ICT security whilst respecting countries' interests. We welcome the agreement to strengthen cyberspace security and also the code of conduct, as well as an agreement to ensure cyberspace security. We would stress that it's important to support developing countries when we're talking about digital technology. The relationship established between human rights and cyberspace means that we need to focus on filling the legal vacuum, and we need to focus on developing international law and modernizing it in this area. As regards the proposal on a global roadmap for international law and its effective implementation, on this, we believe it is important to guarantee that these efforts be continued in the interest of international peace and security. This should take place as part of the Sixth Committee of the General Assembly. In conclusion, the Arab group confirms that the internal discussions within the General Assembly is the only way to discuss the potential expansion and enlargement of the Security Council in line with Resolution 62577 of the General Assembly. Any expansion of the Security Council should take into consideration the request of Arab states to have lasting representation. The Kingdom of Morocco is also looking at a new program, a new agenda for peace. To this end, we underscore the need to invest in prevention at the international, regional, and local levels. We commend the Secretary General's vision to prevent conflicts and to resolve conflicts peacefully. We welcome the Secretary General's desire to prioritize peace building, and lasting peace requires investing in the link between peace building and human rights. To tackle the root causes of conflict, the Kingdom of Morocco is firmly committed to strengthening and promoting human rights and public freedoms as internationally defined. We underscore the importance of the role of human rights institutions and mechanisms within the UN. It is necessary for these mechanisms to enjoy the necessary resources and budget so that they can carry out their task. Morocco underscores that women and children are key stakeholders in peace building. Their active involvement needs to be bolstered in all efforts seeking to promote peace. Morocco also believes that peacekeeping operations are one of the best and most important tools that the international community has to foster peace. Therefore, we are actively involved in peacekeeping operations and have been for several years now. We are a TCC and a PCC. In conclusion, we welcome the impetus in the area of peacekeeping reform, A4P and A4P+. Thank you. I thank the distinguished representative of Morocco on behalf of the Arab Group. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, once again, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that if we want all 87 member states to take the floor today, it is crucial that member states do stick to the speaking time of 5 minutes when speaking on behalf of a group and 3 minutes when speaking in national capacity. Thank you very much indeed. And I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Croatia on behalf of the group of Friends on the Responsibility to Protect. You have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Under Secretary General, distinguished colleagues. The group of Friends of the Responsibility to Protect, consisting of 54 members, and this year co-chaired by Botswana, Costa Rica and Croatia, would like to reaffirm its commitment to paragraphs 138 and 139 of the 2005 World Summit Outcome Document, namely the responsibility to protect populations from genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing. Atrocity prevention and the effective implementation of the responsibility to protect agenda can contribute to fulfilling the Secretary-General's common agenda core values of promoting peace, investing in prevention and embracing a comprehensive vision of human rights. At a time when more than 80 million people remain displaced as a result of armed conflict, atrocities and persecution, we need to redouble our efforts to create a better, more sustainable, peaceful future for our people and planet. Thank you, and now I would like to add a short comment in Croatia's national capacity. In its national capacity, Croatia also aligned itself with the statement to be delivered by the European Union. The respect for international law, including human rights law, is crucial for prevention of conflicts and atrocity crimes. The threat of use of force is against the UN Charter and the international law. The act of aggression is a crime, whether we all agree on details of its definition or not. In 2005, we consensually adopted the World Summit Outcome Document, committing ourselves to prevent atrocity crimes. However, what is the reality? What we are increasingly facing are threats of force as well as acts of aggression, and atrocity crimes continue to be committed. The essential element of building back better and the new social contract that the Secretary-General advocates should be improved prevention of conflicts and atrocity crimes. On a long run, the most efficient way to achieve it is to address their root causes. We must devote more attention to social and economic factors and measures aimed at social development, equality within and between states, rule of law, leaving no one behind, prevention of structural discrimination, as well as 2030 agenda in general. Structural measures to prevent conflicts and atrocity crimes should therefore be a part of our common agenda and practically implemented. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Croatia on behalf of the group of group of Friends rather on Responsibility to Protect. I now give the floor to the representative of the EU. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, Mr. Under Secretary General, dear colleagues, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the EU and its member states. North Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Ukraine, Republic of Moldova and Georgia also aligned themselves with this statement. Mr. Vice President, our efforts to maintain peace and security are closely interlinked with what we discussed in the first two clusters: our ability to address poverty, injustice, and climate change, promote global health, uphold all human rights, promote the rule of law, and enhance the involvement of women and youth. The picture is indeed alarming. The highest number of violent conflicts since 1945, repeated violations of the UN Charter and international law, the return of military coups, rising impunity, and human rights and the rule of law under assault. New crises are erupting, while existing ones are becoming protracted. The nature of conflicts have also changed. New actors are gaining ground. There are new challenges and threats, such as cyber attacks, disinformation, none of which our current toolbox is fully ready to deal with. We clearly need a strengthened approach to peace and security, and we fully support an ambitious new agenda for peace, one that advances a comprehensive and integrated approach to peace and security, including by addressing cross-cutting issues such as organized crime, corruption, and climate change. The new agenda should also reinforce the commitment on women, peace, and security by ensuring the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in all stages of peace processes and peace building. The new agenda should put a strong focus on prevention and strengthening mediation capacities, including those of regional organizations. We also strongly echo that UN 75 declaration's call for the Secretary General to make full use of his diplomatic toolbox, including the unmatched legitimacy of his good offices. All the more important when global tensions are on the rise, threatening to paralyze the Security Council. The EU would like to offer support for the new agenda to progress, particularly in the following 5 areas. Firstly, we need to be better equipped to tackle new threats and challenges. This requires strengthening our cooperation to prevent and counter terrorism and cyber-related risks, including disinformation, a more determined commitment to non-proliferation and disarmament, and strengthening our foresight capacity. Secondly, we must invest much more political and financial capital in preventing conflicts and building peace and confidence. This includes applying a gender perspective throughout all our work related to peace and security. There can be no sustainable peace without a holistic approach to peace building that is anchored in human rights and is inclusive of all of society. The Peacebuilding Commission still has untapped potential as a convening and collaborative body. We look for it to be focused and operational and able to attract real commitments from governments, major donors, and IFIs. The Peacebuilding Fund has proven its worth but lacks predictable and sustainable funding. The EU and its member states have contributed more than 60% of the PBF's budget, but more is needed from all of us. We are open to discuss all options, including the possibility of assessed contributions, and we look forward to discussing concrete options at the upcoming high-level event later this year. Thirdly, we need a thorough reflection on the UN role in violent conflicts, and specifically how to ensure that UN peacekeeping missions can contribute to the advancement of political solutions to conflict and are well equipped to address today's new challenges, including terrorist groups and mercenaries. The UN needs to adjust and rethink peacekeeping while being more operational in peacekeeping settings. And of course, we say this with the greatest respect for the women and men who make up our joint peacekeeping operations around the world. Fourthly, we need concrete measures to ensure that the Security Council, as the main body for international peace and security, is responsive in the face of serious human rights violations and abuses. The ACT Code of Conduct on Security Council action against genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, and the French-Mexican initiative on the suspension of the veto in cases of mass atrocity should be explored within the new agenda. We strongly call upon all to back up those initiatives. Fifthly, the EU and its member states welcome that peaceful, secure, and sustainable use of outer space features so prominently on our common agenda, including as a deliverable for the Summit of the Future. We recognize the need to discuss ways and means to reinforce global governance of outer space and address challenges such as space debris in close cooperation with the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs. Mr. President, any new agenda must be underpinned by reinforcing human rights and fundamental principles of international law and the UN Charter, such as respect for territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence, and the prohibition of the threat of or use of force against any state, currently put into question across the globe, including on the European continent. Diplomacy and peaceful settlement of disputes must always prevail. The EU also supports the Secretary General's proposal of a global roadmap for the development and effective implementation of international law. We hope to conclude this year negotiations on the BBNJ. We must also strengthen transitional justice and accountability and advance our work in fighting impunity, including through the ICC. The effective implementation of the R2P agenda would contribute to this effort. Making a fuller use and ensure sustainable funding of existing human rights mechanisms is also essential. We should make better use of the work and information gathered by special procedures and mandate holders in Geneva, as well as of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Moving on to the digital space, an area rich in opportunities but also of increasing risks, such as the misuse of technology, cyber attacks and disinformation, all putting at risk a truly global, open, free, stable and secure internet. But if we manage to protect the digital commons as a global public good, achieve affordable connectivity and digital inclusion, close the digital divide and ensure the protection of human rights online as we do offline, then digital technologies can serve as enablers and accelerator for the SDGs and further advances in other areas. We've made serious financial commitments towards promoting sustainable connectivity across the globe, particularly in Africa, where we are building robust partnerships aimed at bridging the digital divide. Providing the necessary infrastructure is part of this offer, including via our new Global Gateway strategy. The Global Digital Compact could serve as to turbocharge implementation of several SDGs. The EU looks forward to engaging constructively towards a truly human-centric Global Digital Compact, one that ensures human rights and addresses both opportunities and risks. The roundtables and the Secretary General's roadmap on digital cooperation can form the technical backbone for principles and commitments, while a listening exercise with true multi-stakeholder engagement could launch the reflection as to what the new compact should entail. We call on the Secretary General to make use of all existing fora, including the Internet Governance Forum. The outcome should be a stronger, inclusive, human rights-based and multi-stakeholder internet governance. The EU stands ready to share its expertise on data protection, digital services, artificial intelligence, as well as the code of conduct on countering illegal hate speech online. We also support a strong role for the Tech Envoy's office and look forward to the swift nomination of a new envoy. Lastly, we welcome the Secretary General's resolve to address disinformation and misinformation online and offline. We need a whole-of-society approach, fully in line with human rights standards, one that invests in education, media literacy and pluralism, awareness raising, resilience and trust, and that involves all relevant stakeholders. We are ready to share our experience, including of the EU Code of Practice, the first self-regulatory set of standards to counter disinformation in Europe. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the European Union for his intervention, and I now give the floor to the Honourable and distinguished representative of Australia on behalf of the Cans. Once again, colleagues, I would like to respectfully draw your attention on the importance of respecting the time limit of 5 minutes for a group, 3 minutes for a country. Otherwise, all 87 countries registered for taking the floor today won't be able to speak. Thank you. Australia, dear Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President and Under Secretary General. I have the privilege to address this Assembly on behalf of Canada, New Zealand and my own country, Australia. CANS welcomes the opportunity to contribute to this third thematic consultation and believe that proposals in this cluster should collectively drive implementation of the full suite of targets under SDG 16. Mr. Vice President, maintaining peace and security is at the heart of the UN Charter. The UN was created to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, a mandate which has placed human rights, disarmament, peace building and conflict prevention at the core of the UN's work globally. As we confront new challenges to building and sustaining lasting peace, the Secretary-General is right to recognise that our collective peace and security is increasingly under threat from emerging risks and dangerous trends for which traditional approaches are inadequate. It's against this backdrop that we broadly welcome the Secretary-General's proposal for a new agenda for peace, including his appeal to update our vision and step up our ambition for disarmament and to take a holistic approach to addressing all forms of violence. We also welcome the Secretary-General's calls for UN peace-building efforts to be underpinned by predictable and sustained financing. Investments in conflict prevention and peace building are critical to addressing the root causes of violence, staving off an escalation that heightens the risk of atrocity crimes, preventing a recurrence in conflict-affected areas, helping countries affected by conflict attain the SDGs, as well as promoting human rights and gender equality. Yet, despite these benefits, we continue to rely on extra budgetary and voluntary funding for conflict prevention and peace building. In addition to investing in peace, we must examine the structures we have established to foster it. CANS welcomes the proposal to strengthen the role of the Peace Building Commission, including its capacity to address cross-cutting issues, and commits to engaging substantively in these discussions. Mr. Vice President, our delegations believe that the UN has a role to play on cyber security issues. Together, we've been strong supporters of the framework for responsible state behaviour, which has been developed over more than 10 years. However, we do not believe that the UN needs to create new work streams to address some of the cybersecurity issues identified in the report. Rather, we believe that these issues should continue to be addressed at the UN Open-Ended Working Group on ICTs, which has a mandate to further examine rules, norms and principles of responsible state behaviour in cyberspace. Similarly, we are strong supporters of multilateral efforts to promote the peaceful, secure and sustainable use of space. Our collective engagement, both at the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space and the Open-Ended Working Group on Reducing Space Threats, concretely contributes to this. While opposed to creating parallel intergovernmental discussions, we are interested in the Secretary-General's proposal for a further dialogue on outer space. It's important that multi-stakeholder perspectives be considered. The scale of the challenges facing us in the space domain and the consequences of failing to address them mean we should explore every opportunity to build momentum. As we approach the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we're reminded of the enduring nature of the rights enshrined in the Declaration and the ongoing need to defend them. CANS remains steadfast in its support for the Secretary-General's call to action for human rights and supports efforts by the UN system to strengthen human rights mechanisms, recognising the positive steps already taken in this regard, while calling for greater efforts to overcome persistent challenges, including efforts to weaken or undermine existing mechanisms. Digital technologies and other frontier issues have the power to reshape our world, and we remain open to further examination, as proposed in the report, of how existing international human rights laws and frameworks can be upheld and applied to these emerging issues. The Global Digital Compact proposal has the potential to be a positive approach to addressing the challenges and opportunities that have emerged and that will continue to evolve from global digital transformation. And we, as members of the Freedom Online Coalition, also see the coalition playing an effective role in multi-stakeholder consultations on how to develop the compact. CANS countries remain strong supporters of the rule of law and a human rights-based approach at the national, regional and international levels. The rule of law underpins the international rules-based system that remains so essential to our collective peace and security. Our acceptance of the compulsory jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice reflects the importance CANS attaches to the role of the court and to the peaceful settlement of disputes in accordance with international law. Individual accountability for the most serious crimes of international concern is equally critical to achieving sustainable peace and reconciliation. And in this regard, CANS recognises the instrumental role played by the International Criminal Court, the ad hoc tribunals, hybrid courts and other international accountability mechanisms, as well as the role of national jurisdictions in the pursuit of justice for atrocity crimes. In this spirit, we note the proposal for a global roadmap for the development and effective implementation of international law and welcome its emphasis on compliance issues. We encourage the Secretary-General to provide further information on the proposal, including the intended format and outcome of the dialogues proposed to take place in this Assembly. Mr. President, in closing, this cluster covers many significant issues that require further considered discussion and elaboration, and We've touched on a few today, but look forward to engaging constructively and collaboratively with all members on proposals aimed at promoting peace, international law and digital cooperation. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Australia on behalf of CANS for his intervention, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Costa Rica on behalf of a group of countries. You have the floor, sir.
Monsieur le Vice-Président,
Mr. Vice President,
on behalf of Canada, Colombia, República Dominicana, Georgia, Germany, Ireland, the Kingdom of Netherlands, Liberia, Panama, the Republic of Korea, Norway, South Africa, Switzerland, Uruguay, and Costa Rica. The proposed new agenda for peace, Mr. Vice President, rightfully includes a refreshed vision on disarmament and arms control, a multi-stakeholder effort to reduce violence, reflecting the reality that most lethal violence worldwide takes place in non-conflict settings, an increase in investments for prevention, and seeks to finally place women and gender equality at the heart of peace and security. We strongly support that to, quote unquote, more effectively address violence holistically, the new peace agenda must bolster a multi-stake effort to reduce violence significantly worldwide and in all of its forms. The Pathfinders multi-stakeholder project to have global violence by 2030, spotlighted in our common agenda, seeks to do just that, establishing a concrete target. In the absence of a clear and shared target, the international community is unlikely to be galvanized into transformational action. Such a target is ambitious but feasible, as demonstrated in various locations around the world. Our common agenda notes cities as increasingly important multilateral actors. This must be the case when tackling all forms of violence, as cities can and are leading on issues of urban violence. With most violence deaths worldwide taking place disproportionately on the streets and in homes of urban areas, a renewed multilateralism must connect cities to multi-stakeholders violence reduction efforts as showcased by initiatives such as Peace in Our Cities. To respond to all forms of violence, both a whole government, an array of ministries and federal instances, but also state and city leaders as a whole of society approach, including civil society, academia, and the private sector, are essentials. We must identify solutions drawn on national and city experiences and build linkages across the dimensions of violence, bridging the silos between conflict, urban violence, and interpersonal violence. The Halving Global Violence Task Force reflects a broad coalition in which different communities of practice and knowledge can connect, engage, and act, aiming to become a unified voice that will elevate the efforts of all constituting communities with prevention as its guiding principle. The new agenda for peace should put national actors front and center of prevention efforts with a broad political support of the United Nations. Creating prevention strategies can be complex for governments. National-led approaches would benefit from development of voluntary self-directed guidelines on prevention. This new agenda for peace underscores the importance of placing women and girls at the center of security policy. And one priority must be to increase efforts of gender-responsive small arms control, such as the efforts of the Gender Equality Network on Small Arms Control. Disarmament and arms control are cross-cutting threat reducers with great potential impact for the prevention of multiple forms of violence. Finally, greater attention to the world's most impactful tools of violence. Small arms and ammunition dovetails with the Secretary General's disarmament agenda, emphasis on that disarmament saves life. A national comment on my own, Mr. Vice President, will be to underscore the inclusion of the positioning of outer space in the common agenda and a word on the needs of ministries for peace in all countries. Muchas gracias, señor vicepresidente.
I thank the representative of Costa Rica on behalf of a group of countries, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Singapore on behalf of a group of member states. You have the floor, Madam or Sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the following countries: Finland, Mexico, Colombia, Denmark, Fiji, Indonesia, Italy, Jamaica, Kazakhstan, Kenya, Latvia, Namibia, the Philippines, Qatar, Rwanda, Switzerland, and my own country, Singapore. We'd like to thank Undersecretary General Volker Turk for his briefing on this third thematic cluster entitled Frameworks for a Peaceful World, Promoting Peace, International Law, and Digital Cooperation. As for the other issues in this cluster, the opportunities and challenges we face in the area of digital cooperation are tremendous. However, to maximize the opportunities, we need to work together to put in place a framework for international cooperation. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated technological change and the digital revolution, transforming our societies and economies. If we do not act urgently, digital divides will widen and many nations will be left behind. It is in this context that we wish to address the Secretary General's proposal for a global digital compact. First, we welcome the proposal for a global digital compact. We believe that it is timely to start a discussion on a framework for international cooperation on digital issues and digital technology. The digital space is a global commons in need of multilateral action. As the Secretary General has highlighted in the Common Agenda, the potential harms of the digital domain risk overshadowing its benefits. Today, 2.9 billion people remain digitally disconnected. Around the world, governments are grappling with the negative effects of digitalization, including misinformation and data misuse. The challenges posed by digitalization are global in nature and therefore require a concerted global response. Second, a key objective of the Global Digital Compact must be to close digital divides and support sustainable development. We believe that the overarching focus of the Global Digital Compact should be on leveraging digital transformation to improve lives, empower people, and advance the Sustainable Development Goals. We should prioritize areas with urgent need and broad agreement amongst member states, such as closing digital divides and expanding connectivity, including affordable infrastructural connectivity, and securing early achievements in these areas will add momentum to our efforts and drive our process forward. We should also build upon the good work that has been done to implement the Secretary General's roadmap on digital cooperation. The key pillars of the roadmap, including global connectivity by 2030, digital inclusion, and human rights, can serve as building blocks for the compact. Third, the United Nations has a central role to play in building consensus on the issues of digital technologies, especially in terms of how such technologies can be harnessed to support the work of the UN in areas of peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. While there are multiple international platforms to deal with the issues of digital technologies, telecommunications, and the internet, the United Nations can serve as an important venue to bring these conversations together and build common ground. The UN provides the inclusivity and legitimacy that is much needed to work together to lay down common principles and guidelines for cooperation. The UN is also a platform where the voices of small and developing states can be heard and their interests taken into account. Fourth and lastly, it is essential to adopt an inclusive approach that involves all stakeholders when discussing the Global Digital Compact. It is important to engage with the private sector, academia, civil society, and local expertise, and to seek their views and perspectives. We also support the important role that the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology will play in this process. We look forward to further discussions with all member states on these issues. As members of the Group of Friends on Digital Technologies, we believe that the Group of Friends can serve as a useful platform to facilitate discussions, build common ground, and advance the digital agenda at the United Nations. Mr. Vice President, please allow me to make a few brief points in my national capacity. First, Singapore supports the Secretary General's call for greater efforts to protect and manage the global public good of peace. The world is going through a period of geopolitical and economic upheaval. We agree that there is a need to strengthen the UN's role in maintaining peace and security and in promoting a rules-based multilateral system that creates a stable environment for all. In this context, the Secretary General's proposal for a new agenda for peace merits further discussion. Second, Singapore fully supports and agrees that international law and its effective implementation are critical for peace, prosperity, and sustainable development. The UN has played an indispensable role in the progressive development and codification of international law, and one of its greatest contributions was the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, for which we will commemorate the 40th anniversary this year. At the same time, we believe that it is important for states to help each other address the challenges faced in the effective implementation of their respective international law obligations, including through capacity building and technical assistance. Thirdly, Singapore agrees that there is a need to reduce strategic risks, including in the cyber security sphere. As the Secretary General highlighted in the Common Agenda, new technologies are giving more actors the capacity to disrupt global stability. Cyber incidents involving the malicious use of digital technologies take place daily throughout the world. We have made some progress on this issue at the UN, and we now have an initial framework of norms, rules, and principles for responsible state behavior in cyberspace. But much more work needs to be done, and Singapore will continue to fully support multilateral efforts to build a safer and a more secure cyber environment. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Singapore for his intervention on behalf of a group of member states, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Austria on behalf of the group of friends of the rule of law. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the group of friends of the rule of law, a group comprising over 50 states from all regional groups. We thank the PGA for convening these consultations as follow-up to our Common Agenda report and Under Secretary General Volker Türk for his presentation today. We see the discussion on this cluster on the promotion of peace and international law as an occasion to point out once again the importance of the rule of law. Respect for international law and the UN Charter is a key prerequisite for the maintenance of peace. Adherence to international legal norms and rules make the world more predictable, but that only holds true if norms are actually applied and adhered to. The group welcomes that the Secretary General gives high priority to the promotion of the rule of law and international law in the framework of our Common Agenda. A revitalized social contract, as proposed by the Secretary General, should be guided by the promotion of and respect for the rule of law at the national and international levels. Rule of law is not an end in itself. It's an essential condition for peace and the result of a common understanding to solve conflicts by following certain pre-established norms and rules. As members of the group, we expect the strong integration of the rule of law and respect for international law in the follow-up process to the Our Common Agenda report. Let me say very clearly, we need better implementation of rules and norms, strengthened respect and adherence to treaties, codification of customary law, more recourse to international courts and tribunals in cases of dispute, and accountability for norm violations, especially of international human rights and humanitarian law. International law and the rule of law must be at the very core in the further process of the Common Agenda. We ask you, Mr. Vice Chair, and the others in charge of drafting the summaries of these open consultations to put special emphasis on the rule of law and international law and to ensure that these issues are dealt with as a priority in the coming years at the United Nations. Mr. Vice President, with your permission, like the other colleagues, I will now add a few comments in my national capacity. Austria thanks the Secretary General for his report on our common agenda and fully aligns with the EU statement. For Austria, it is key that this whole process treats all three pillars of the Charter equally. We fully subscribe to the centrality and universality of human rights in all dimensions, recognize that they are treated as a cross-cutting theme throughout the report, and welcome the Common Agenda's focus on new areas. Austria supports the findings on a more open, free, and secure digital future. A human rights-based approach towards new technologies and the digitalization of our everyday life is essential. We'll continue to promote the digital humanism agenda to strengthen human rights in all multilateral processes. We welcome the focus on accelerating implementation of the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, as well as on the need to respect international law and the rule of law. Mutual trust and compliance with international law is the basis of a functioning multilateral system. We have to strengthen our efforts to reinforce that trust. States can do this, for example, by accepting compulsory jurisdiction of the 𝐼𝐶𝐥 without reservations. Austria looks forward to engaging on the proposed roadmap and highlights the role of the Sixth Committee, encouraging reflection on how to better use this forum in an outcome-oriented way. Mr. Vice Chair, Austria fully supports the proposal for a new agenda for peace, pursuing 6 core areas with focus on conflict prevention, confidence building, disarmament, the rule of law, and counterterrorism. Regional platforms such as the OSCE and the AU should be partners in these activities. The new agenda should strengthen mediation efforts and the UN's role on delivering on its central promise of peace. The public regards the UN as the world's primordial organization to maintain international peace and security. In order to make full use of its diplomatic toolbox, we propose that the Secretary General establish a small advisory body in regard to Article 99 of the UN Charter. Article 99 gives the SG the right to bring to the attention of the Security Council a situation that can threaten international peace and security. The world today witnesses many diverse crises. Whether a situation merits recourse to Article 99 requires an in-depth assessment of many factors related to security, politics, technology, ecology, finance, law, etc. With specific advice from such a group of dedicated experts, the SG would have a serious argument to bring a situation to the attention of the Security Council, ideally at an early stage. This would be very much in line with the SG's focus on conflict prevention and assist the Security Council in fulfilling its mandate. The new agenda for peace also provides an opportunity to shed light on the contribution of the wider UN system to the peace and security agenda, such as the UN Office on Drugs and Crime in preventing and combating organized crime, including emerging global threats such as cybercrime. We also fully support the Secretary General's proposal to work towards peaceful, secure, and sustainable use of outer space and avoid militarization of space. We welcome his proposal for dialogues on outer space in preparation for the Summit of the Future to develop further the principles of governance of outer space activities. As co-chair of the Group of Friends of the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, we stand ready to support the Secretary General in efforts to preserve outer space as a global common for future generations and to make best use of existing UN structures such as UNOSA. Thank you.
Je remercie le représentant de l'Autriche.
I thank the representative of Austria for his statement, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada, speaking on behalf of the group of Friends of Women, Peace and Security. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice President and Undersecretary General, I'm very pleased to be speaking on behalf of the group of Friends of Women, Peace and Security, an informal network of 65 member states representing all 5 regional groups of the UN, as well as the European Union. As we discuss the follow-up to the Secretary General's Our Common Agenda report, as we are doing today, we want to emphasize the importance of putting all women and girls at the center of our efforts on peace and security. What can we do to achieve this? We believe that the international community must focus on the full and effective implementation of Resolution 1325 and subsequent resolutions that call for women to play an integral role in peace and political transitions, conflict resolution, peacekeeping, and peace-building efforts at all stages. The United Nations must lead by example and ensure that all UN-supported peace processes require women's full, equal, and meaningful participation. We have had to learn these lessons the hard way. Processes that do not include women and their perspectives not only lack inclusiveness and legitimacy, they also miss the opportunity to address the root causes of conflict and are thus bound to fail. They are also used to legitimize women's exclusion. Efforts to achieve gender equality are important, but we should not stop there. We must first fully integrate gender perspectives in all peace processes. Second, ensure women's full, equal, and meaningful participation as negotiators, mediators, and in other leadership positions in peace and security. Third, increase the number of civilian and uniformed women in peacekeeping at all levels and address barriers to their meaningful participation. And finally, ensure adequate, predictable, and sustained funding for local women peace builders, human rights defenders, and gender equality advocates. They must receive the support they need to carry out their work safely, independently, and without interference. Putting women and girls at the heart of peace and security requires us to ensure the protection of and the respect for the human rights of all women and girls. It requires us to create safe and enabling environments for women to meaningfully contribute to building and to sustaining peace without any kind of reprisals. Putting women and girls at the heart of peace and security also requires us to put an end to sexual and gender-based violence. It is critical that we scale up our efforts to prevent such violence and ensure that victims and survivors can access the comprehensive support they need to fully recover from these violations, meaningfully participate in decision-making on prevention and response, and to be able to reintegrate in their societies without fear of stigma or any further abuse. We must also ensure accountability by perpetrators and access to justice for victims and for survivors. We welcome the Secretary General's recommendations in this regard for an emergency response plan to accelerate the eradication of violence against women and girls. Mr. Vice President, we call on all partners to make all women and girls a priority of our common agenda. Si je peux dire en quelques paroles en français, Monsieur le Président, au nom du Canada, nous avons deux priorités.
We have 2 priorities. First, the key issue of the universality of human rights. We stress the importance of this idea because it means that it is humans who are at the center of all our efforts. And the second point is the key importance of the principle of equality between men and women. And as far as we are concerned, that is still very important for the United Nations. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Je remercie le représentant.
I thank the representative of Canada for his statement, and I thank him for abiding by the time limit. The Secretariat has reminded me that this time limit is 5 minutes, even for those states on speaking on behalf of a group, and then in their national capacity. So it is still remains 5 for both. I now give the floor to the representative of Finland, speaking on behalf of the Nordic countries. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you, Chair. I am speaking on behalf of the Nordic countries, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and my own country, Finland, on digital cooperation. The Nordic countries welcome the strong emphasis of our common agenda on digital cooperation. We support the proposal for a global digital compact that can accelerate the implementation of the SDGs. We should start with an open and informal process soliciting inputs and scoping content for the compact before starting any intergovernmental processes. We can build on the recommendations of the roadmap for digital cooperation. The potential of digital technologies for human progress and development is tremendous. We must harness these opportunities for the benefit of all, while addressing the challenges in cooperation with all stakeholders, including the private sector and civil society organizations. Digital inclusion is an urgent global priority. We need more work in connecting the world in an equitable manner in order to reduce the digital divides, not least for women and girls. The COVID pandemic has highlighted the crucial importance of connectivity for the economy, for education, for development. Closing the digital divide is crucial for the Agenda 2030. Digital inclusion, achieving global access, is not only about building the connections. We need also to invest in skills and digital literacy in order to provide people with digital competence. Digital connectivity is a priority for development, but we need also to engage the private sector and foster an environment conducive to private investment in global connectivity. The digital environment is an important global commons, and we must safeguard the fundamental interoperability of the global internet. It is crucial that the internet remains open, free, and secure, with equal access and inclusiveness for all, while being guided by the principles of rule of law. The global multi-stakeholder model of internet governance, including governments, civil society, and the private sector, needs to be protected. The principle that human rights apply online as well as offline need to be crystal clear. The same human rights, responsibilities, and obligations granted to individuals and states of the physical world must also apply in the digital space. We must also make sure technology respects human rights by design, not by default. We need transparency on the use of algorithms and establishing limits to their harmful use, especially protecting children. Gender-based harassment needs to stop. A practical way ahead could be the dissemination of successful regional regulatory models. For instance, privacy and data use have a good European template. The UN's convening power is key to bridge the digital divides, reassert human rights online, and protect the global, multi-stakeholder character of the internet. We welcome an emphasis on strengthening the smart use of data and foresight within the UN system. The UN 2.0 concept can play a key role in uplifting the work of the United Nations. The Nordic countries hope the UN Tech Envoy would be instrumental in bringing these different strands of digital cooperation together and function as a catalyst for progress. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Finland for his statement, and I also thank him for respecting the time limit. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mali, speaking on behalf of the African Group. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, Mr. Undersecretary General, Excellencies, in English.
Statement on behalf of the African Group. The African Group welcomes the sustained attention given by the Secretary General to international peace and security by proposing the development of a new agenda for peace. We share the Secretary General's view on the need for a peace continuum based on a better understanding of the underlying drivers and system of influence that are sustaining conflict while prioritizing investment in prevention. We also welcome its emphasis on risk identification, reduction, and adaptability, supporting regional prevention and advancing the WPS agenda. The African Group believes that the new agenda for peace should put national actors front and center of prevention efforts, given that the conflict prevention is a state responsibility. The prevention agenda must be integrated into national policy and efforts, with the Sustainable Development Goal at the core of its approach, as underdevelopment is a major root cause of conflict. The United Nations should embrace and adequately support nationally owned and led prevention strategies, including through capacity and institutional buildings, so as to enable countries concerned to set up their own context-specific prevention strategies. The UN should also promote coordination and coherence in support of national prevention strategy. Africa continues to host most of peacekeeping and peace-building activity. The African Group therefore underlined the need for an enhanced partnership that is directed towards strengthening capacity and institutions and ensuring adequate, predictable, and sustainable financing for Africa peace and security activities, including for AU-led peace support operations. The African Group equally shared the Secretary General's concern over the too little progress on adequate, predictable, and sustainable financing for prevention and peace building. In this regard, the African Group supports allocating a certain percentage of assessed contribution to support peace buildings. We call on member states to fulfill their commitment in this regard, and particularly as we approach the GA high-level meeting on financial for peace building in April, with the view to reach an action-oriented outcome. With regard to disarmament, the African Group stressed its principled position that the total elimination of nuclear weapons remains the only absolute guarantee against their use or threat of use, as their presence constitutes an existential threat to humanity. The African Group reaffirmed the centrality of achieving NTP universality, maintaining the balance between the three pillars of NTPs, preventing the inalienable rights on the nuclear weapon state to peaceful use of nuclear energy. The group attaches great importance to fighting the illicit flow of small arms and light weapons. The group also called on banning lethal autonomous weapons system, as the use of such weapons would violate international law and create an accountability gap. The African Group welcomed the attention given to the report on the consolidation of peace and outer space. The group stressed the outer space as common heritage of mankind must be explored and utilized exclusively for peace purposes and for the benefits of all states, based on the principle of non-appropriation and peaceful use. The group underlined the importance of investment in the sustainability of outer space for future generations. With regard to human rights, the African Group reaffirmed its support to the full realization of a human rights treaty monitoring system within the context of the relevant UN resolutions. The group stresses that human rights should be addressed by the UN organs that are mandated to do so, and with the context and parameter of their respective mandates. The group asserts the centrality of the principle of non-intervention in the internal affairs of states. In this regard, countries should engage with the human relevant agencies at their own request, to promote and protect human rights through technical assistance and capacity building. The group reaffirmed the importance of equitable resource allocation through the Fifth Committee for Promotion and Protection of Human Rights without any distinctions, including the right to development. On the Security Council reform, the African group reaffirmed that the common position of Africa espoused in the Edzalweni Consensus and the Sirte Declaration should continue to serve as the only viable option that reflects Africa's legitimate right and aspiration to rectify the historical injustice endured by the continent and to ensure Africa's full representation at the Security Council. The African Group firmly believes that the decision 62/557 and its IGN is the only great agreed upon forum through which the reform of the Council should be achieved. We reaffirm the interlinkage and inseparability between the 5 key issues of the reform process as reflected in paragraph E of decision 62/557. Concerning international law, the African Group reaffirmed the importance of preserving the mandate of the ILC, being the entity in charge of the progressive development and codification of international law under the supervision of member states through the Sixth Committee. As we propose organizing the debate of the General Assembly on international law issues of global interest, this should not be used as a way to circumvent the Sixth Committee established practice of consensus, which mark the working method of the Sixth Committee. The African Group welcomes the proposal of the Global Digital Compact and trusts that it will be developed through an inclusive intergovernmental process. In conclusion, the African Group seeks more clarity on the proposed related to reshaping response to all forms of violence, a new system-wide protection agenda, a new vision for the rule of law. The African Group reiterates that any normative development of human rights should be within the context of international consultation that is consensual and transparent. As such, the group is not in favor of any attempts aimed at codifying new norms outside this process. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Mali and now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland on behalf of countries on the Global Digital Compact. You have the floor, madam.
Mr. Vice President, let me first thank the PGA for the organization of this third cluster debate and USG Volker Türk for his rich presentation. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of Albania, Andorra, Australia, Belize, Burundi, Canada, Costa Rica, Fiji, Georgia, Guatemala, Honduras, Israel, Japan, Mexico, Moldova, Montenegro, Morocco, New Zealand, Norway, North Macedonia, Philippines, Republic of Korea, San Marino, Senegal, Serbia, Singapore, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom, Ukraine, the European Union and its 27 member states, and my own country, Switzerland. We wish to welcome the Secretary General's proposal put forward in his report, Our Common Agenda, to agree on a global digital compact that outlines principles for an open, free and secure digital future for all by 2023. Rapid technological change and digitalization continue to reshape our world, present unprecedented opportunities while widening digital divides. A global compact to provide principles and improve cooperation for these challenging and dynamic developments is most timely. We echo the need to reach global connectivity by 2030. We believe that the United Nations provide the appropriate forum for the elaboration of such a compact. An inclusive process should bring together governments, the private sector, civil society, and all other actors in a multi-stakeholder approach. The compact should build on the ongoing work to implement the Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation and avoid duplicating or infringing on existing UN processes. To inform the content of such a global digital compact, we encourage the Secretary General to initiate, as a first step, an informal, open and inclusive process to invite views and inputs from all actors. For this, we call on the Secretary General to make the fullest use of existing fora, in particular the Internet Governance Forum, as well as other relevant processes and initiatives such as the Technology Facilitation Mechanism and the Roadmap for Digital Cooperation, including related multi-stakeholder roundtables. True inclusivity and transparent dialogue will allow for the consideration of the broadest range of perspectives and foster ownership among stakeholders, thereby building a solid, sustainable and balanced basis for further deliberation on the matter. In this context, we support the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology in coordinating and advancing these efforts and look forward to a speedy appointment of the Envoy. You can count on our continued support. I thank you.
It is now my pleasure to say a few words in my national capacity. Peace, justice, and human dignity are fundamental values of the United Nations. So we should better prevent injustices. There are 3 avenues in particular that deserve to be explored. First, respect and promotion of international law. Switzerland is firmly committed to the implementation and development of international law. In the digital world, Switzerland is committed to ensuring an open, free, secure, and peaceful cyberspace, and to promoting the recognition of, respect for, and implementation of international law in this space, in particular with regard to human rights and international humanitarian law. Human rights also apply in the digital space and are a central pillar of international regulation in the area of digitalization. Switzerland furthermore supports the proposal for a global digital compact and is convinced that an inclusive and multi-stakeholder process is key to develop a common approach. Secondly, the development of a new agenda for peace. Switzerland joins the Secretary-General's call to invest in prevention and peace building. As a major donor in this area, we support a more substantial role for the Peace Building Commission. We also expect concrete results at the high-level meeting on peace-building financing in April. Switzerland attaches great importance to the maintenance and further development of international arms control and the disarmament architecture, while at the same time exploring new themes and innovative approaches. Finally, the new agenda for peace must place women and girls at the heart of security policies. Thirdly, the peaceful use of outer space. We will continue our commitment to the global governance of space activities, and we support the idea of a strengthened multi-stakeholder dialogue. Progress must be made to promote the long-term sustainability of space activities and move towards new instruments to prevent an arms race and to promote responsible behaviour in space. Thank you very much. I thank the representative of Switzerland for her statement and for having respected the time limit. Thank you.
Distinguished representative of Germany, on behalf of the Human Rights and Conflict Prevention Caucus, you have the floor, colleague.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am delivering these remarks on behalf of the Human Rights Conflict Prevention Caucus in New York, co-chaired by Germany and Switzerland and its members Albania, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Gabon, Guatemala, Japan, Mauritius, Mexico, the Republic of Korea, Rwanda, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and Uruguay. Mr. President, multidimensional challenges faced by the international community require an equally multifaceted response. The caucus recognizes the importance of close cooperation between different UN actors and encourages an effective cooperation between the 3 UN pillars to strengthen the UN's conflict prevention capacities. In the interest of achieving a peaceful world, it is about time to maximize the resources of the international community to promote peace and sustainable development, protect human rights, and prevent conflict more effectively. To this end, we strongly encourage the organs of the United Nations to make full use of their mandates and the tools at their disposal. For example, through the exchange of information between the Security Council, the Human Rights Council, and the Peacebuilding Commission. The Peacebuilding Commission plays an important convening role. It contributes to strengthening the participation of peacemakers and civil society actors while providing a space for discussion on cross-cutting challenges. We believe that an expansion of its role, as suggested by the Secretary-General, can enhance closer cooperation between the different UN bodies and mechanisms and to overcome silos, to strengthen system-wide responses and preventive measures. We therefore encourage an exchange of information between the Commission and any entity contributing to conflict prevention and peace building, including the Human Rights Council and regional organizations. In that regard, we would like to underline that the Human Rights Council has extended an invitation for a yearly briefing to the chair of the Peacebuilding Commission and encouraged the chair to seize this opportunity. We support the SG's call to action for human rights as integrated in our common agenda, and we are committed to work together, including through making human rights commitments a reference point in the design and delivery of crisis prevention initiatives. By doing all this, we can unleash the full preventive potential the UN has to offer. Our common agenda gives us a new opportunity to foster these efforts. The respect for the rule of law is also indispensable for lasting peace. We cannot talk about peace and security without upholding the promotion and protection of human rights and ensuring accountability for human rights violations and atrocity crimes. Building peace further requires a safe and inclusive environment for civil society. We must address the increasing number of reprisals against human rights defenders, the global shrinking civic space, and attacks on freedom of expression, association, and assembly. In contexts marked by violence and conflict, inclusive and comprehensive transitional justice processes can help societies to rebuild fragmented relationships and trust in institutions and appropriately address the past. Through its focus on the rights of victims and survivors, as well as the accountability of perpetrators, it is a powerful instrument to prevent the recurrence of violence. We acknowledge the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on human mobility, leaving many refugees and migrants stranded in very vulnerable conditions, and therefore lacking access to basic services such as health, work, social security, housing, and education. The solutions to these problems are diverse. We note the references contained in the Global Compact on Refugees and the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migrations in this regard. Mr. President, it is indispensable and indisputable that systematic human rights violations are an early indicator of conflict on the one hand, and that respect for human rights can prevent conflict and contribute to sustainable peace on the other. As a cross-regional group of member states, the caucus stands ready to work with all member states, civil society, human rights defenders, and the entire UN system to address cross-cutting issues on peace and security from a prevention and human rights perspective with effectiveness and accountability. I thank you. And now allow me a few sentences in my own national capacity. Mr. President, I shortened my statement, which will be, however, available in full length on e-statements, and I wish to add and focus on one issue that is particularly important for us and has not been comprised in the group statements we heard so far as the German position is concerned. I focus on digital cooperation. Germany fully supports the elaboration of a global digital compact. Such a compact should reaffirm our common principles and commitments for an open, free, inclusive, safe and rights-based digital future, which allows borderless communication and drives innovation while leaving no one behind. Germany is looking forward to a comprehensive and inclusive multi-stakeholder process. The compact should be fully in line with existing human rights standards. The same rights that apply offline must apply online. Our initiative on privacy in the digital age, we present this resolution together with Brazil in the GA and at the Human Rights Council, can deliver important benchmarks that can be channeled into a global digital compact. The responsible and human rights-based use of artificial intelligence is key for our societies and economies. Germany adopted its artificial intelligence strategy on these fundamental principles and is a founding member of the Global Partnership on AI. Germany sees the concept of digital public goods and infrastructure as a crucial element within the GDC process, and I would also like to highlight the Charter for Digital Public Goods, co-led by a variety of partners, including Germany. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Germany for her intervention, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Jamaica on behalf of the Caribbean community. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the 14 member states of the Caribbean community. and we align our remarks with those made by the distinguished representative of Pakistan on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. As we have indicated in our previous statements, CARICOM will focus on key issues for the region that can best be addressed through the multilateral system. We do so conscious of the many excellent proposals that are aimed at national policies and actions. So, Vice President, all of our societies have suffered the consequences of disinformation and related phenomena, especially as magnified by social media and digital networks. The COVID-19 pandemic has only served to make the situation even more acute. In this regard, CARICOM notes with interest the proposal for a global code of conduct that promotes integrity in public information. We also note with appreciation the proposal for a global digital compact. The pandemic has laid bare the digital divide while simultaneously highlighting that all of our futures will contain an increasingly important digital component. It is imperative that discussions surrounding the Global Digital Compact must be open and inclusive and, among other things, seek to create a more equitable digital future. Mr. Vice President, CARICOM looks forward to the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and 30 years since the adoption of the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action on Human Rights in 2023. And while we recognize that these are significant milestones in the fight for human rights, we also recognize that the fight continues for many. Therefore, we support the strengthening of human rights mechanisms such as the Universal Periodic Review. CARICOM joins the call for the full and effective implementation of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action in an effort to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. In this regard, we anticipate the effective functioning, support, and resourcing of the newly established Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. The forum must receive the full support of the UN system and member states as it works towards analyzing the historic and contemporary inequities from which people of African descent continue to suffer. It will make a valuable and insightful contribution to the conversation about reparatory justice, to which CARICOM is deeply attached. Finally, Mr. Vice President, we are several decades into the debate on the reform of the Security Council. CARICOM's position is well known, and I had the opportunity to underline it only a few days ago in the context of the IGN. What is clear to us, and made all the clearer by a number of ongoing international security crises, is that in its present form, the Council does not appear able to address as effectively as we would wish the security challenges the world is facing. The new agenda for peace put forward by the Secretary General in our common agenda will be difficult to achieve unless we make headway on this important issue. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Jamaica, and I would like to thank the ambassador for respecting his time limit. We are now starting, colleagues, the list of countries who will speak only in their national capacity, and I would like to respectfully remind you once again of the time limit of 3 minutes for individual countries. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan. You have the floor, Ambassador.
I would like to begin by expressing Japan's support to the idea of discussing the new agenda for peace at the Summit of the Future. At the same time, I wish to stress that ongoing processes should be respected and duplication be avoided. The added value of the